Today, we are going to be going through how to manage your key financial tasks using the streamlined process flow inside Expense Plus. That's going to be the first part of the session. The second part of the session is then going to build on from that, talking about the task management module and how you can assign and track and manage tasks effectively. Now, as we go through the key tasks, so Jack and I will both take you kind of through the different sections for these. We'll explain we explain what each task is. We'll also explain how it can be managed efficiently within Expense Plus, and we'll also suggest to you the frequency that you may wish to adopt for each task for your church or charity. Now, that comes with a caveat that no two churches and charities are the same. And so you may choose to do things differently, and that's completely okay. And the great news is that the process flow within Expense Plus is customizable. So you will be able to do whatever your charity decides. Expense Plus is built around having a streamlined process flow. And whilst there are lots of modules within Expense Plus, the key steps and many of the key steps are laid out on the dashboard, the process flow version of the dashboard that you can see on screen and in front of you right now. So I'm going to talk you through the different tasks, first of all, in the expense approvals and payments process flow. Now, you'll be glad to know this is not going to go into super lots of detail. You probably already are familiar with many of these tasks, and so I'm not going to go into loads of detail. However, we do offer other training sessions, including our live tour session and also a specific training session all about the process flow that we're about to go through in about 5 or 6 minutes. You can go into a much more in-depth training for that if you would like to. And so if that is for you, then please do check out the link that we'll send at the end of this to the other training sessions that we offer. These is worth. So we're going to start with entering purchases, and this module essentially replaces the need for kind of filling out paper-based forms, and it replaces the need to have to kind of enter manually all the data on those forms to create accounts. It also means staff and volunteers can submit expenses from anywhere, and you can save time and money and paper from having to kind of print out invoices and receipts and file them, etc. So that's all done, and that works really nicely, as you are very possibly aware already. Staff can view past expenses, they can view current expenses, so they don't need to keep checking in to ask where their kind of expense claims are up to. There's another great reason that they should use this module. And it works typically best if people that make purchases on behalf of your church or charity do enter purchases within a few days of the purchase happening. So the answer to the kind of how frequently do we do this task? Well, the answer is the people making purchases should do this task, and they should do it within a few days of purchase happening. Why is that? Well, for invoices, it means suppliers get paid back in a timely way. For card purchases, if you've got any debit or credit cards in the organization's name, it makes bank reconciliation super straightforward if those purchases have been entered. It also means you're going to have fewer lost receipts, and it also means that expenditure will show up in your finance reports straight away. There's obviously nothing worse than viewing your finance reports thinking that everything's on track, and then someone appears next week with a load of expenses, maybe £500 worth of expenses that they've been saving up for the last 6 months, and suddenly you see a different picture. So we would encourage you to encourage the people that are making purchases on behalf of your charity to submit them in a timely way. How can you do that? Well, you can issue a policy for your church or charity. I've switched over to showing you our blog, and we'll include a link to this in the follow-up to this session. But essentially, this blog allows you to kind of download templates of kind of like template policies. So, for example, this one, a purchasing policy, which you can then customize for your church or charity. It's just a really helpful way of letting everyone know what you're expecting and kind of getting them to agree to what you're expecting in terms of how purchases should be entered and also when they should be entered as well. Expense Plus doesn't have a per user charge, and so actually each member of your team that are making purchases can enter their own purchases. And we'd strongly recommend that this is done by those. This step in the process is done by those people making purchases. It literally takes 60 seconds to enter purchases. It's really not difficult. If someone's able to make a purchase, which is probably taking them several minutes, they can definitely enter a purchase. Let's go ahead and do it. You can time me if you want. So we're going to enter a purchase. We went to Asda today. The fund here will typically default for most users. We're going to select the category, which is our consumables category. We are going to pretend that we bought some paper, and we are going to pretend that we spent £10 on paper, so we can enter that in here. It's defaulted to my name. All we have to do is attach a receipt. I'm not actually going to attach a receipt to this one. We're going to click submit and tell it we've done it later. And that's literally it. So it's super quick to enter a purchase. So there's really no excuse for people not entering their own purchases. And in fact, it takes much longer were I to have actually sent the receipt and sent all of these details as to what the purchase was for over to one of you guys to enter. That's really not efficient. So it's best if people enter purchases themselves, and that makes it really easy for that then to flow through the process flow. So hopefully you're familiar with this screen. This is enter purchases. Typically, purchases should be entered in a really timely way. Manage receipts is the next step in the process flow. It takes around 5 seconds to check receipts. So we're going to click check uploaded. We're seeing a digital copy of the receipt here. We're comparing it to kind of purchase details, and we're going to click accept. It's really that quick to check receipts. And the person doing this step would typically be someone in your finance team. Again, this step is typically done weekly. Why weekly? Well, it provides a really good balance between efficiency and also not holding things up in the process flow too long. So we would suggest weekly. Most churches and charities do this step maybe earlier in the week, so maybe a Tuesday or a Wednesday. They'll check all the receipts that need doing, and they'll go through and check all of those receipts in one go, and then they'll come back and do the same next week. Approve expenditure then is the next step in the process flow. This is this screen here. Now, there's lots of different ways that you can customize this module. We're not going to go into that at all. We're just going to mention that this screen replaces the need for kind of paper-based approvals, and it also provides budget holders real visibility of not just what they're approving, but also how much has been spent from each budget in live time. Budget holders don't need to log into this screen because they get a morning email at 7 a.m. and they can approve purchases directly from that email. Approvals are literally one click, and it makes it super easy for budget holders to track what has been spent from their budgets. And therefore, when do approvals happen? Well, naturally, they often happen kind of just after 7 a.m., the day after you do receipt check. That's another reason to kind of maybe not do receipt checking every day, because that way your budget approvers could end up kind of approving the purchases over multiple days. Actually, if you just do receipt check, say on a Tuesday or Wednesday, the next morning will be when the approvals will happen. Next step in the process flow then is payments. And so this is kind of the final step in this process flow. You'll see that ExpensePlus automatically groups purchases for the same person together to make it really efficient and save you from kind of having to add up the different kind of receipts and the user and the person made purchase having to do the same. Actually, ExpensePlus does this for you. It's got one-click copy functionality for copying and pasting the amounts and the references into your online banking. And if you happen to be with NatWest Bankline or Virgin Bank or Unity Bank, then actually there's an even quicker way to kind of download a payment file and upload it inside your online banking. And so when a payment's done, typically, again, weekly, often a couple of days after the receipt check's done, which just allows time for the budget approvers to approve purchases. Again, this is about making this process flow efficient. So often done weekly, often done by someone in the finance team. And as mentioned, they would use this kind of one-click copy functionality to set up payments. Now, assuming you have dual authorization set up on your bank account, which means that when you set up the payments or someone does, someone else has to authorize them. Again, there's a really efficient process flow for this by clicking this email payment authorizers button. So once you finish setting up the payments, you can click this button. That will email your payment authorizers, letting them know to sign into ExpensePlus, to sign into your online banking, and then so you can just batch approve all of the ones in ExpensePlus and do exactly the same inside your online banking. So again, really efficient and really easy. So hopefully that makes sense. Purchase entered in live time, receipts typically checked weekly, approvals happen automatically when those morning emails go out to your different approvers. You can approve on behalf of someone if they happen to be on holiday or are not able to approve in a timely way. And then payments typically done weekly as well. You can expedite things through this process flow where needed, but hopefully that kind of frequency will give you a nice balance of making sure you make timely payments and not making people wait too long. I'm just going to check my notes inside here. In case there's anything that I've missed. Yeah, the final thing just to mention is that you can also customize users' access. So each of your team, you can give access to these different modules. In fact, you can do that throughout Expense Plus. And so actually, if, for example, you know you're going to be away and you want someone else to do receipt checking, you can give someone else permission to do to this receipt checking module. And so it's possible to assign user access and really customize how you do that. The other thing to mention is if you're doing this process flow weekly and you're away for a week, maybe you're the person that checks receipts and makes payments, you could also just decide to skip a week. And again, that probably would still allow a fairly reasonable time for paying back suppliers and people that are owed money. So hopefully that makes sense. In a moment, we're going to look at bank reconciliation, which is kind of the other task that is typically done weekly. But before we do that, I'm very, very quickly going to mention about creating invoices and bank deposits. So the invoicing module inside Expense Plus allows you to efficiently create invoices. It obviously avoids then having to kind of key in data from a separate system to create accounts because the data's already there. It works really nicely in terms of one of you guys creating the invoices, me doing bank reconciliation. The invoices you create will appear on my bank reconciliation screen. When I reconcile an invoice payment, they'll then update your invoicing screen. So it works really nicely as a module, as well as being a really efficient way to kind of create invoices inside of Expense Plus. And so this is the invoicing module. When would it be done? When would it be used? Well, it would be used as and when. As and when you need to create an invoice for a customer, you would come to this module, and it can be done by whoever you give access to this module to. In terms of bank deposits, then this module again is used as and when, and this module is only for cash and checks that need to be taken to the bank. So maybe we've got the cash and checks in front of us, we are counting the money, we're kind of allocating it correctly. This is where we do it inside this screen as and when. Note it's only for cash and checks, and it will be done by the person that you give access to. The person that's actually going to count the money and take it to the bank, then this is the module that you would give that person access to. So hopefully, again, that makes sense. That's an as and when module as well. So then I'm going to cover one kind of final thing before I hand over to Jack, and that is bank reconciliation inside Expense Plus. This is the kind of final task that's one of those kind of more frequent kind of weekly type tasks. We're going to go into the bank reconciliation module. It's worth saying this actually used to typically be a monthly task. So for most churches and charities, they would kind of create monthly accounts, which would mean the first week in the kind of new month, they would upload their bank transactions for the prior month and reconcile transactions for the prior month, and then obviously create accounts off of that. That's absolutely fine to do. You can absolutely do that. And so you might be one of those churches and charities that do reconcile monthly. However, with the introduction of open banking, transactions automatically kind of get pulled through 3 or 4 times a day. And so there isn't kind of the need to wait until month end to upload a file. You can just reconcile as and when. Of course, you can reconcile transactions every day that come into Expense Plus, but for most churches and charities, they would be looking to reconcile maybe every few days, maybe every week, or if you do prefer, you can do this step monthly. And so reconciling transactions, I'm not going to try and explain how this works in detail because we have a brilliant training session which you can book onto for that. But in a nutshell, you can then reconcile transactions. You can quick match recurring transactions, so we can reconcile all of these transactions that kind of happen each kind of month or have happened before. We can reconcile all of our outgoing direct debits and standing orders also at the click of a button. Now, all of the kind of payments that we've processed through the process flow we've talked about, all of the bank deposits, all of the invoices are going to be sitting on this right-hand table, and it's a really straightforward task of reconciling these transactions just by clicking and making sure that you're matching the right things together. Expense Plus goes green to really help you know how to do that, and we can just go ahead and we can reconcile this transaction as well. I've selected the wrong person, so let me select the right person. We can click confirm. So that's bank reconciliation, and for the small number of transactions that are left, you can just add these really easily using this kind of pop-up that appears. So that is bank reconciliation in a nutshell. Hopefully you either already know how to use bank reconciliation, or you can check out the training session that we provide. But typically this is done weekly for most organizations, or more frequently if you appear. Before I hand, if you prefer, before I hand back to Jack, just to mention our training page, we'll send a link to this. This has all of the different training sessions. You will have had to go here to book onto today's training session, but do check out these other training sessions specifically around streamlining expenses and payments, which I've covered in this, invoicing and bank deposits, which I've also covered, and bank reconciliation, petty cash. All I've just mentioned in a kind of 5 or 10 minutes is covered in much, much more detail in those sessions. buttons. So I'm going to hand back to Jack. We've ended with kind of weekly tasks, and Jack's going to move us on to talking about monthly tasks now.
Thank you so much, Sam. Yeah, we're going to start with the next part of our process flow, and that is claiming gift aid. So you can use ExpensePlus to submit gift aid claims directly to HMRC for donations received from a named donor with a valid gift aid declaration. We have a whole help guide article on which donations do qualify for gift aid within ExpensePlus in our help guide. So do check that out if you're unsure. But ExpensePlus can generate and submit gift aid claims at the click of a button. So previously, you may have claimed gift aid quarterly or maybe even annually because it was a bit of a faff, or it was such a big task that you didn't want to do on a regular basis. You wanted to sit down and work it out on a more structured quarterly or annual basis. Well, with ExpensePlus, that's no longer the case. Claiming gift aid is really quick and easy, and we'd recommend you take advantage of this and claim on a more regular basis. So we would say monthly. This is the first of our monthly recommended tasks because firstly, you get paid the money quicker. It will land in your account earlier. Secondly, if you create accounts on a receipts and payments basis, then this will remove some of those big spikes and dips in income that waiting a while for gift aid can cause. And thirdly, if you create accounts on an accruals basis, it will make it simpler to accrue for your gift aid claims. And if you have auto accruals turned on, ExpensePlus can actually auto accrue this for you. So it's very simple to create a gift aid claim. You can see that ExpensePlus has gathered our information into different by our different funds and our claim period. We can click into it. We can give our claim a title, and then we can simply click create gift aid claim. It is that quick and easy. Alternatively, if you use ChurchSuite to claim gift aid instead of ExpensePlus, that's absolutely fine. You would instead, on a monthly basis, come into our ChurchSuite export module, and you can export your donation details directly from ExpensePlus into ChurchSuite in order to claim your gift aid there. So you can view our gift aid module overview if you want to see a little bit more information about that. So once our transactions have been bank matched, as Sam showed us in the bank reconciliation module, these will appear in your financial reports. And on a monthly basis, we basically want to check that these look correct. So we're going to recommend a few different financial reports within ExpensePlus that we think are really good to check on a monthly basis. But there are loads of amazing finance reports within this module that you might choose to use as well, or you might choose to use more regularly. But on a monthly basis, we would recommend checking out 3 key reports. So the first one of those is going to be our summary by fund report. In this report, you can view this in several different ways. You can view this monthly, quarterly, you can choose a specific month or just use the totals only. And in this report on a monthly basis, we're basically going to check and look for a few key things. The first of those is to do with our expenditure. So if we scroll past our income and go down to our expenditure, lots of organizations will have a category called transactions to be recoded, or potentially under Z and other as a category type. And so we are looking at whether there are any transactions to be recoded that are still within our reports. This is because usually this category would be used for things that maybe need reviewing after the purchase as to where exactly they fit within our category structure, where we want that that expenditure to be allocated to. As a side note, we would highly recommend that you, if you do want to use one of these categories, that you do use quite a specific name like transaction recode, because if you use something simply other, you might find that some of your users are allocating purchases to this category just because they're not entirely certain where it should go, and you've got a broad range of different purchases that are sitting in this other category. For this organization, we can see there's nothing in here. That's great. We're happy with how that looks. But if there were purchases or expenditure in here that we wanted to reallocate before the month finishes, then we would be able to click in and drill into those transactions and reallocate those to the right category or fund of our choice. The next key thing that we're going to look at on this report is to do with our income. So we want to make sure that none of our restricted income has been coded to the general fund. So by default, this has brought up the general fund. In here, you can obviously select as whichever fund you would like, as many funds as you would like for this report. But in our general fund, we want to make sure that there are no restricted income that should be allocated elsewhere. So are there any big peaks that represent maybe a grant that you've applied for and has come into your organization's accounts and has been allocated to the general fund but probably shouldn't be? That's what we want to look for. For example, is there any specific asks that you've done, maybe for roof repairs, and you know that this income would therefore be coming in the coming months? Has that been allocated correctly to a restricted fund for your roof repairs, or have you actually allocated it to your general fund? We just want to make sure that no restricted income has been allocated to the general fund and it's all allocated to the correct place. The other thing that we want to look for in this report, we want to have a look at our variance. So we can check here where you've budgeted to be against where you actually are. So that's both for your income and your expenditure, what you've budgeted, what you expect to have happened year to date or month by month. And this is shown as a percentage, but you can also change that to an amount using the show as amount tick box here under variance. And this will just highlight whether there's anything that needs following up. You can view variance by category group, which was really helpful. So you might have some variance within your categories, but overall, if your category group variance isn't too different to what you're expecting, then you might not have anything that you require that requires investigation. But basically, we're making sure that things, again, have been coded to the correct categories, or if there are some genuine big variances, ensuring that you have investigated these and you know about it in advance of sharing this with other key stakeholders within your organization. So you might be prepared for any questions that people might have about large variances between what you have budgeted for and what is actually going on in your year-to-date accounts. ExpensePlus can also project, there's a projected totals column here. ExpensePlus can project to the end of your financial year. There are 3 different ways that these can be calculated within ExpensePlus, and you get to choose which one you would like to use. So these can be set within your category screen. So if you see a projection that doesn't look right, or you're not happy with it, and you're not happy with the way it's been calculated, then have a look in your category settings and you'll be able to see the different ways that that projected total can be calculated. Okay, so that is our income and expenditure summary by fund. We're going to also have a look at our fund movement summary reports. We'll go back to our finance reports and we can see our fund movement summary here. In this report, again, we're checking on a monthly basis that things look as we expect them to. The income and expenditure for our different funds, any fund transfers that we've registered, any investment gains or losses and asset revaluation. We want to check that we're happy with what those look like. There aren't any figures that stand out as a bit odd or that we weren't expecting. And we've got a few key tips of things that might be worth investigating. So firstly, we spoke about restricted income being allocated to the correct fund. Has restricted expenditure also been coded to the correct fund? So, for example, in this organization, we've got no expenditure so far this financial year for our building project. Now, if we know that actually we have spent some money towards our building project, we've spent some money on renovating the toilet or something like that in your organization's office, then if it's not showing in your expenditure column, that would indicate that it has been coded incorrectly. And that's something that we need to investigate and go and find out where it is. Is it in our general fund? Does it need to be reallocated to our building project fund? So this report is really good at showing us any big question marks about expenditure as well as income. We're also able to look at our fund balances and see, are there any funds that we're not spending from? And is that okay? Is that going to change? Do we need to do something about this? Otherwise, the money's just going to sit in this pot forever. So, for example, for our roof repairs here fund for 2025 to 2028, we've not spent any money from this fund. Now, that might be absolutely fine, because this is a 3-year project. This fund is clearly there for a long period of time. It might be absolutely fine that there's no expenditure in this fund. But if it wasn't okay, if you were thinking, we've not spent any of that money, is it just going to sit there? We're not doing that project anymore. We might just need to make a plan for what happens to the money that is within that fund. Now, one of the other things we want to look at with our fund balances is whether there are any funds that are headed towards a zero balance. And therefore, is there something we need to do about this? Now, you might have, for example, a youth worker grant like we do here. There is expenditure that's gone out. We're actually heading towards we're at a closing balance of £800. We're heading towards, if we continue with this expenditure, potentially a zero balance for this fund. Is that okay? Is that what we've planned for? Have we got an application for further grants to supplement the income for this fund? It just helps us keep an eye on how our funds are doing and whether they are headed towards a position where we're going to need to cover expenditure for that fund from somewhere else, probably our general unrestricted fund. And it's also worth checking that your closing balances are not negative. As we can see here, none of our closing balances for these funds are negative. That's good. If you had any negative fund balances, there are several reasons that might be the case, but it is worth working out how we're going to proceed with that if your fund balances have gone negative. And it's definitely something you want to keep on top of. So that is your fund movement summary. We're also then going to look at another report. Now, this is our balance sheet report. If you account on a receipts and payments basis, you won't have a balance sheet report. So if you are on a receipts and payments basis and you want to just switch off maybe for 2 minutes, you absolutely can. But hopefully it's interesting enough that you would be intrigued by what I'm going to say anyway. If you account on an accruals basis, you will have a balance sheet. And this is a really important, really informative report that is really helpful for your finances at all stages, but definitely, again, as a monthly report to check in on. So this report shows us our current assets, our non-current assets, our current liabilities, and our non-current liabilities for the organization. And then below it shows us how that is broken down by fund, which is really interesting and really useful to know where our assets are sitting. So it tells us our cash balance. It tells us what our accounts receivable are. So as Sam showed us kind of invoicing module, there might be outstanding invoices here that we want to check on, and those would show in our accounts receivable. Any invoices we've sent that haven't been paid would be sitting in here. The balance sheet also has multiple ways to view this report, and one of the really helpful ways is to see it monthly. This will give a breakdown of your balance sheet per financial year. So our financial year started in January 2026 for this organization. This helps us see any trends or changes in our balance sheet across the year. And we're, again, checking that we're happy with that. So we're happy with our accounts receivable. Are we okay with the fact that we have this amount of money outstanding that hasn't come in yet? In the invoicing module, you might have some invoices that need chasing up. And the great thing about ExpensePlus is that our modules communicate across different modules. We can go into the invoicing module and we can actually see, have we got any invoices that are outstanding? Do we need to follow them up? If we do, we can click on this little email item here and we can send a reminder email to any invoices that are outstanding. So that is what you would want to have a look at potentially within your current assets. It's the same with your liabilities. You're checking that these are as you expect them to be. With the opportunity for you to drill into those as well. Like I said, you can have a look into our accounts receivable. We can see what those are made up of. So actually, there aren't any invoices for this organization, but we have got gift aid that's coming in. That's great that we know that. And we've got some termly fees that are, we do have an invoice. We have some termly fees that we are waiting on from this payee here. This report in your balance sheet will also include as well as any auto accruals, it will include any manual adjustments that have been entered. So if these need reviewing or you need to add any manual adjustments, which actually is typically only done at year end, then you can do this. We need to open up our adjustments module from the sidebar menu here. Now, if you operate on a receipts and payments basis, again, you will have access to you will have an adjustments module, but you won't see this manual debtors and creditors adjustment table at the top of your screen. So if you have any manual adjustments that need to be checked, then that is where you can come and do that. But to bring everybody who accounts on a receipts and payments basis back into the session from a practical point of view, this is where we can check our category transfers and our fund transfers. Again, we're looking at whether we are happy with the category transfers that have been entered. Do they make sense? Are there any that need to be added for this month? And the same for our fund transfers. We can have a look and enter any fund transfers that we need to and review any that are showing in this screen. Again, that's a really helpful thing to do on a monthly basis. Let's look at our finance reports again then. Access to these reports is highly customizable. For example, you can give your youth worker access to just the relevant categories that you wish them to see. Reports that we've had a look at, you can customize what access different users have to them. And you can give, for example, the organization leaders access to an overview of income and expenditure for a particular fund or multiple funds if you want to. And the great thing about this is that you now don't need to be sending out finance reports you might do with finance software. And those viewing those reports can view those reports in real time when they're needed, and they're able to drill down into those transactions if you've given them the right access to do so. So instead of downloading a report that is, as soon as you download it, it's kind of dated, and then emailing them to your key stakeholders, you can give direct access to these reports to your key stakeholders, allowing them to view and filter and drill into the reports as you wish them to do so. So we'd recommend, if you're going to send out like a finance summary on a monthly basis, that you include within this links to your 2 or 3 key reports rather than a downloaded attached version, because those receiving the report can click in, they can log into their ExpensePlus account, they can view further information, and they can also just get more used to using ExpensePlus and viewing their finance reports as and when they need to. It doesn't have to be the basis. They can look in real time at their finance reports that access to. They can drill into different transactions if they need to, if you've given them the access to. It gives them a little bit of an opportunity to be more engaged in your organization's finances and have a bit more ownership of their area, if that's their budget or if that's a whole fund. It just gives them a little bit more view and a little bit more ownership. So we really recommend that you do that and give them access. As Sam said, we don't charge per user, so adding your users onto ExpensePlus is really, really valuable, giving them access to the finance reports that they need to see. Now, if you are unfortunately marketing, we have a great help guide article titled "Which Reports Should I Use for My Management Accounts?" So if you're interested in that, please check that out on our help guide, which you can access by clicking this little blue question mark up. It will take you to the right page to find different articles within our help guide. We also run 2 different lunch and learn sessions that cover finance reports. We've got exploring key financial reports and advanced financial reporting. So if you're interested in more information and more in-depth analysis of these, please do book on to one or both of those. And then, as we say, there are loads of monthly tasks that you might want to add into your kind of rotation of things that you want to do on a monthly basis. We've only touched on some of those key ones. Other things you might want to do is you want to look at your donation reports, which a range of reports are released. You into this, and you can access new donors to contact report, where you look at who your new donors are this week or this month, whether you want to contact them and get in touch and share any information with them. You might have donors to follow up. This is a really helpful report if you're using ExpensePlus to follow up with your donors or your users or however you want to use this module. You can. There's a more in-depth session exactly on managing donors within ExpensePlus too. So you can use this report to check on your communication and donors that you need to follow up, as well as a really helpful, exciting report is this one, donors without gift aid declarations. This allows you to kind of keep on top of those donors that don't have a gift aid declaration. You can manage whether you need to contact them, whether it be useful to do so or not. It's got loads of great information for you to have a look at, as well as donation reports. We've also got things like payroll. We've got tidying up. You might want to deactivate your trustees on a month, your payees on a monthly basis. You might want to merge your duplicate donors and check that you haven't got 3 lots of Jim Smith in your donors at the end of each month. And if you're VAT registered, your VAT related tasks might be in this bracket as well, things you want to do on a monthly basis. So that concludes the monthly tasks section of this session. And we're going to move on to looking at the task management module and basically how this can help you do that. So within the sidebar menu, you'll see we have a task management module over here. And it's a lovely purple screen that gives us a fresh look at ExpensePlus, a different module And so within here, this task management module will allow you to keep track of the tasks that you would like to do so within ExpensePlus. So you can add a task that will come up on your dashboard and remind you that it needs to be completed. We can add a task by itself. We can give a task a quick name. We can select the date that it's due on. We can decide whether this is a private task, in which case it would only show up on our ExpensePlus screen. Or if it's not, if it's something for the whole organization, anyone with the right access would be able to view that task. That then allows you to assign this task to a particular user. So it doesn't have to be a task for yourself. It might be one for one of your colleagues or one of your volunteers. And really brilliantly within ExpensePlus, you can provide a link for that task. So for example, if you are adding a task that related to the receipts module, you can add a link to this task that will send whoever you assign this to straight to the module that this relates to. So that is adding a one-off task. But what we tend to see with lots of our customers is that they will have a set of tasks, a template task set, as we call them in here. So if we have a look at this organization, they've got 2 sets of template task sets. They've got a monthly finance tasks and an annual finance tasks. If we click into our monthly finance tasks, this is where this organization have added all the finance tasks that they would like to complete on a monthly basis. And they've broken this down by week. So we can see that we've got receipt check in week 1, as well as reconcile transactions for week 1 and claim gift aid for the prior month. So this is not a weekly task, this is a monthly task. We've got things like make payments for week 2. And we can scroll down. We've got deposit cash at the bank towards the end of the month. So if we go back to the task management screen, we can generate the next set of these tasks by choosing our template task set, our monthly finance tasks. We can select the start date, so the start of April for our week 1 receipt check. So hopefully we're halfway through April. Hopefully some of these would have been done, but we can generate these tasks and they will show within the task management module. These can really helpfully be ticked off by the user in question so that we can know as and when they are complete. So you can have view and you can see which tasks within your organization have been complete, which are still to be completed. We can see by this little exclamation mark within a triangle that this task is overdue. So ExpensePlus gives you a really visible, obvious way to see which tasks need doing and have passed their deadline. As you can see for this organization, we've kind of generated months worth of tasks, half of which should have been completed earlier in the month. So there's quite a few here for us to catch up on in this organization. As we said, you can add private tasks. So if you added a private task, this would show in this screen, but only for you as the user who created that task. It wouldn't show up for the rest of your finance team users or any other users within ExpensePlus. And the great thing about our task management module is you can also add multiple task sets at the same time. So you can see in this organization, we've got a monthly finance tasks task set, which tasks are going to be ticked off and cleared as and when on a weekly or monthly basis. But we also are able to add our annual finance tasks in here. They will then kind of show in our screen as and when we want them, but they won't have to be included in that monthly finance task set. I'm saying lots of task and set all at once. This is a job for me to be doing. But our annual finance tasks can kind of either, if they need to sit on our task management screen all year round, then they can do. But if they only need to be generated at a particular time in the year, then they can also be done like that as well. I know I've gone through that quite quickly, but that's partly because the task management module is really simple to use. We think it's brilliant. You can see that there are links to the module. So for example, if we click on this task that is assigned to Stan, it says it's receipt check. There's a link here and it's taken us straight to the receipts module. So Stan can simply click into check uploaded and start checking the receipts in question. It is a brilliant, really helpful module. It gives you the opportunity to view things that others are getting on with as well as your own. So you, for example, you might not use ExpensePlus currently for your task management. You might use something like Trello. Those are brilliant pieces of software. Within ExpensePlus, though, you can see what other people are getting up to within your organization's task sets, not just your own.